I met my wife because of my sister. It wasn't one of those setups where your sibling awkwardly tries to introduce you to someone, hoping it turns into something. No, this was different. My sister, Megan, had a best friend in college, someone she lived with in the dorms, studied with, did everything with. Her name was Emily. The first time I saw her was during a holiday break. Megan had brought her home for a few weeks since Emily's family lived across the country. She fit in so easily, laughing at my dad's terrible jokes, helping my mom set the table, arguing with Megan about stupid things from their classes. She was beautiful, smart, and had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room when she talked to you. I fell for her. Hard. We started dating shortly. After Megan and Emily graduated, and within 2 years, we were married. It was perfect. Our love felt effortless, like something that was meant to be. 9 years later, we had 2 kids, a home that felt warm and full, and a life that seemed right. Emily and Megan remained best friends. They spent nearly every day together. Pilates, brunches, weekend trips. At first, I thought it was great. My wife had someone she trusted completely, someone she could confide in. But sometimes I'd joke, "I swear you two are closer than we are." Emily would just smile and say, "She's my best friend, you should be happy we get along." And I was. Then came the reunion. 10 years since they had graduated, and Megan and Emily decided to host a weekend gathering at our place, inviting the 6 friends they were closest with back in college. It was supposed to be a nostalgic, fun time, reminiscing about old memories, catching up on life, laughing about how different we had all become. The first night, we drank too much. People started talking about things that should have stayed in the past. Someone, I don't even remember who, turned to me and said, "Man, how do you feel knowing your wife and your sister used to hook up?" I laughed at first, assuming it was a joke. But when I looked at Emily, she had that split-second hesitation, that brief flicker of panic in her eyes. I turned to Megan. Same look. The room went silent. I swallowed. "What?" Megan sighed, running, a hand through her hair. "It was a long time ago, before you and Emily even met. It wasn't serious, just a phase." Emily nodded quickly. "Yeah, it was stupid. We were just young and experimenting. It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. That night, as I lay in bed, I told myself it didn't matter. It was in the past. But something about the way they had reacted, the way they had both frozen, the way they had looked at each other, stuck with me. The reunion ended. The next day, and as people were packing up, one of Emily's old friends, a guy named Travis, pulled me aside. His breath reeked of alcohol, and he leaned in close. "You know they never stopped, right?" I felt my stomach drop. "What?" He smirked like he was telling me the most obvious thing in the world. "Come on, man. Megan and Emily? They've been together this whole time. You seriously didn't know?" I felt sick. My hands started shaking. I wanted to punch him, to call him a liar, but something inside me knew he wasn't just making this up. I walked away, locking myself in the bathroom. My mind spun, searching for signs, proof, anything that could confirm or deny what he had just told me. But there was nothing. No late-night texts, no suspicious behavior. I told myself it was bullshit. That night, I went to bed early, trying to push the thought away. Emily kissed me goodnight like always, whispered, "I love you," and rolled over. Sometime past midnight, I woke up. The bed was empty. I frowned, sitting up. The bathroom light was off. Then I heard it, whispers coming from downstairs. I got up, moving quietly down the hallway, then to the top of the stairs. My heart pounded as I listened. "Megan. Emily." "I already talked to him," Emily whispered. "He told him. Travis fucking told him." Megan swore under her breath. "Shit. Does he believe it?" "I don't know. He's acting normal, but we have to be careful. We need to make sure he doesn't suspect anything. We'll have to see each other less for a while. Just until this blows over." A pause. Then Emily's voice again, softer. "I can't lose him, Meg." "I know," Megan whispered back. "But we can't lose each other either." I gripped the railing so hard my knuckles turned white. I had spent 9 years of my life believing in something that had never been real. I stood there at the top of the stairs, my breath shallow, my hands gripping the wooden railing as if it were the only thing keeping me upright. My heart pounded so loud I swore they could hear it from downstairs. "I can't lose him, Meg, but we can't lose each other either." The words echoed in my skull, bouncing off the walls of my mind like a hammer. Against glass. I wasn't supposed to hear this. I wasn't supposed to know. For 9 years, I had loved her. I had built a life with her. And for 9 years, she had been lying to me. I stepped back from the staircase, moving quietly down the hall, my legs feeling numb. I didn't go back to bed. I couldn't. Instead, I walked into the guest room and shut the door behind me, locking it. My hands were shaking as I pressed them against my face, trying to steady my breathing. My wife was cheating on me, not with another man, with my sister. I wanted to scream, punch the walls, break something, but all I could do was sit there in the dark, my chest rising and falling in rapid bursts. I tried to make sense of it, tried to understand how I had been so blind. How long? Had it ever stopped? Or was it always happening, right in front of me? My mind replayed every moment, every time they went on their little girl trips, every whispered conversation, every time they had brushed it off as nothing. I thought of Megan spending the night at our house so many times over the years, sleeping in the guest room. I thought of the way they always seemed to be in sync, the way they shared these secret looks, inside jokes I was never part of. And then I thought of Emily, my wife, the mother of my children, the woman who had promised to love me, to be faithful to me. I had never once doubted her, never once questioned her loyalty, and she had been lying to me for 9 years. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the guest bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning in endless circles. At some point, I must have drifted off because the next thing I knew, there was a knock at the door. "Babe?" Emily's voice, soft, gentle, the voice of a liar. "Why are you in here?" I sat up slowly, my head pounding. I couldn't face her. Not yet. I couldn't sleep, I said, my voice hoarse. "Didn't want to wake you." A pause. "Are you okay?" No, I was not okay. I was unraveling. "I'm fine." Another pause. Then, "Come back to bed?" I swallowed. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell her I knew, that I had heard everything, that I had spent the whole night drowning in the truth. But not yet. "Yeah," I said, forcing my voice to sound normal. "Just give me a minute." I heard her footsteps retreat down the hall. I ran a hand down my face, exhaling shakily. Not yet. For the next few days, I watched them. I didn't let them know anything had changed. I went through the motions, pretending. Like everything was normal, like I wasn't dying inside. Emily kissed me like always, smiled at me like always, told me she loved me like always, and I pretended to believe her. But I was watching now. I was listening, and I saw it. It wasn't in the way they acted when they were together. That was the most fucked up part. They were careful. They had been hiding this for so long, they had perfected it. No stolen glances, no nervous tension. But when they weren't together, that's when I saw the cracks. The way Emily's knee bounced anxiously when Megan wasn't around. The way she'd glance at her phone like she was waiting for a message. The way she seemed distracted, lost in thought. And Megan? She was worse. She was restless, twitchy. She kept finding excuses to come over, even when there was no reason to. And when Emily wasn't home, she barely made eye contact with me. They were trying to act normal and failing. A week later, I made my move. It was a Sunday afternoon. The kids were at a play date. The house was quiet. Megan had come over, as she always did, and the three of us were sitting in the living room. Emily was scrolling through her phone, Megan pretending to watch TV. I was watching them. I let the silence stretch. Let them sit in the discomfort of it. Then I said casually, "Travis told me something interesting before he left last week." Emily froze. It was a small thing, just a fraction of a second, but I saw it. Megan turned her head, her body tensing just slightly. I leaned back, keeping my voice even. He said you two never stopped, that you've been together this whole time. Silence. I could hear the ticking of the clock, the distant hum of the fridge, the sound of my own breathing. Emily finally looked up. What? Megan let out a dry laugh. That's ridiculous. I stared at them. Is it? Emily swallowed. Of course it is. He was just drunk, talking out of his ass. I nodded slowly. Right. So if I had overheard a conversation between you two, where you said you needed to be careful because Travis told me the truth, that wouldn't be real either? Their faces went pale. I let the silence stretch, watching the panic set in. Megan opened her mouth, then closed it. Emily looked like she was about to cry. Tell me the truth, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Right now. Emily shook her head. It's not. Don't fucking lie to me. She flinched. Then Megan exhaled, rubbing her temples. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I laughed, a hollow, broken sound. What? Me finding out? Or the part where you've been fucking my wife for 9 years? Emily wiped at her eyes, her hands trembling. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. And then the worst part, the part that killed me, she didn't deny it. She just looked at me, her eyes full of tears, and whispered, I didn't want to hurt you. Something inside me snapped. I stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. Get out, Emily blinked. What? Get out. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. Megan moved first, grabbing her coat, her eyes wide with something that looked like guilt. She pulled Emily up by the arm. Come on, she murmured. Emily didn't move. We can talk about this. There's nothing to talk about, I said, my voice like steel. You lied to me for 9 years. She started crying harder. Please. I turned my back to her. I heard the front door open, then close. I was alone, and for the first time in my life, I realized I had been alone for a long time. The house was silent, not the peaceful kind of silence, but the kind that suffocates you, the kind that presses against your chest, making it hard to breathe. I stood there, staring at the empty living room, at the spot where Emily had been just moments ago, where Megan had stood, eyes wide with guilt. They were gone. I had thrown them out, and yet the house still smelled like them, like Emily's perfume, like the faint trace of Megan's shampoo. It made my stomach turn. I walked into the kitchen, gripping the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. My whole body was trembling, the rage still pulsing under my skin. I had wanted to scream, to break something, to make them feel even a fraction of what I was feeling. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there, breathing through the anger, through the betrayal, through the raw, open wound that had just been ripped wider than I thought possible. 9 years. 9 years of my life wasted. 9 years of building a marriage, of raising kids, of believing in a love that never existed the way I thought it did. 9 years of being the fool. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. No, not anymore. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found my lawyer's number. This was over. Emily didn't come home that night. I didn't expect her to. Instead, she sent a text. Emily, please, can we talk? I stared at the screen, my jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. Me. There's nothing to talk about. The message delivered. She read it. No response. A few minutes later, another text came through. Emily, I don't want to lose you. I threw my phone across the room. It hit the wall with a crack, the screen shattering. I don't want to lose you. She had already lost me. The only difference was that now she knew it. The next morning, I woke up to my sister standing on my front porch. Megan. She looked like hell. Her eyes red and swollen, her hair a mess. She had always been the composed one, the one who never let emotions get the best of her. But now, she looked just as wrecked as I felt. I didn't say anything as I opened the door. She stepped inside hesitantly, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to be here. I'm sorry, she whispered. I laughed. the sound empty. "You're sorry?" She flinched. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Yeah?" "Well, you did," she swallowed, shifting uncomfortably. "I tried to stop. We both did, but—" "But what?" My voice was sharp, cutting. "But you just couldn't help yourself?" Megan bit her lip, her eyes glassy. "I love her." I felt something inside me crack. "You love her?" She nodded. "And she loves you too. I know it doesn't make sense, but—" I let out a harsh breath, shaking my head. "No, don't. Don't fucking stand there and try to justify this to me. You had 9 years to stop, 9 years to tell me the truth. Instead, you lied. Every single day you lied to me." Megan wiped at her face. "I didn't know how to tell you." "You didn't want to tell me," I corrected, "because it was easier to keep pretending, easier to let me believe my marriage was real." Silence. She didn't deny it, because we both knew it was the truth. Finally, she looked at me, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant to take her from you." I stared at her, my expression cold. "You already did." She inhaled sharply, then nodded. And just like that, she turned and walked out the door. I didn't stop her. I didn't have a sister anymore. The divorce papers were filed that week. Emily tried to talk to me, called me, sent messages, showed up at the house. I ignored her. I wasn't interested in her excuses, in her tears, in whatever pathetic attempts she was making to fix this. There was no fixing this. I had been played for 9 years. That wasn't something you came back from. I told her I'd fight for full custody of the kids. She cried, begged me not to take them from her. I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered what I had heard that night. I remembered the whispers, the lies. And I realized she wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing the life she had built around her lies, and I wasn't going to let her keep it. The final hearing was brutal. Emily sat across from me, her hands trembling, her eyes hollow. She looked like she had aged years in the span of a few months. Good. She deserved every second of it. I didn't say a word to her as the judge signed the papers. It was over. 9 years of marriage, reduced to a few signatures on a stack of documents. When we walked out of the courthouse, she stopped me, her voice shaking. "Please," she whispered, "don't hate me." I stared at her, and then I smiled, just a little. "I don't hate you, Emily," I said quietly. "I just don't care anymore." Her face crumpled. I walked away. People say betrayal changes you. They're right. I wasn't the same person I had been before that reunion, before that night on the stairs. That man had died the moment he heard the truth. But the man who walked away from it all, he was finally free. Life didn't just go back to normal after the divorce. There was no clean break, no simple way to erase 9 years of love and betrayal. I didn't wake up one morning suddenly free of the weight pressing against my chest. No. The pain lingered, the anger, the resentment, the humiliation. But I did wake up alone, and that was better than waking up next to a lie. Emily had moved out. The house felt different without her in it. Quieter, colder. The kids were still adjusting, confused, asking questions I wasn't ready to answer. They missed their mother. And I hated that I couldn't take that pain away from them. But I wasn't going to lie to them, not like she had lied to me. Megan tried to reach out. She sent messages, voicemails, emails. I deleted them all. She didn't exist to me anymore. People asked if I would ever forgive her, if I would ever forgive Emily, if time would soften the sharp edges of what they had done to me. I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that every time I thought of Emily's voice in the dark, whispering, "We have to be careful," something inside me twisted into something unrecognizable. That wasn't love. That was survival, and I was done just surviving. One day, months after the divorce, I ran into Emily at the grocery store. It was one of those stupid, mundane moments in life that shouldn't have mattered, but it did. She was standing in the produce aisle, staring at a row of apples like they held the secrets of the universe. Her hair was pulled back into a loose ponytail, no makeup, dark circles under her eyes. She looked different. Not the woman I had married. Not the woman who had kissed me every morning for 9 years and whispered that she loved me. She looked smaller, diminished, like someone who had lost everything. And in a way, she had. She must have sensed me staring because she turned. Our eyes met, and for a second, neither of us moved. Then she swallowed. "Hi." I didn't respond. She shifted awkwardly, gripping her shopping basket like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "How have you been?" I could have lied. Could have said, "Fine." Could have said, "Better than ever." Could have said, "Dying inside, but thanks for asking." Instead, I just shrugged. Emily exhaled, looking down at the floor. "I miss you." I laughed under my breath, shaking my head. "No, you don't. You miss what we had. And that's not the same thing." She flinched. "I never wanted this." "Then you shouldn't have lied to me for 9 years. She bit her lip, looking like she wanted to cry. But I didn't care. Not anymore. I stepped past her, grabbing a bag of apples from the shelf, and then I walked away. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't just break you in the moment. It changes the way you see the world, the way you trust people, the way you trust yourself. For a long time, I questioned everything. Every choice I had made, every moment I had ignored, every time I had believed her when she said, "I love you." But one day, I woke up and realized something. I wasn't the one who had failed. I wasn't the one who had ruined a family. I wasn't the one who had spent 9 years living a lie. That was on her. That was on Megan. Me? I was still here. I was still standing. And for the first time in a long time, I was finally free.